Good morning and welcome to the 2021 Central Minnesota Regional Housing Forum. I'm Warren Hansen, President of Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. This housing forum is co-sponsored by Minnesota Housing, the Initiative Foundation, Central Minnesota Housing Partnership, and Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, with some support from Bank of the West. We're excited to have Minnesota Housing's Assistant Commissioner of Policy and Community Development with us today, Ryan Baumtrog. Ryan is one of our biggest allies at the Capitol and has helped to maintain that essential bipartisan support for housing at the legislature for many years. And Ryan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Warren, and good morning, everybody, live from my basement. We've got a jammed, packed schedule for you, but thanks for taking the time this morning. You're going to hear some awesome things, and you'll see throughout the day there's Minnesota Housing staff available throughout this virtual meeting. We've got members from our single-family team, our multifamily team, and even though you'll be sad that the meeting will end today, just take a note of who's on the call from Minnesota Housing. Make a connection, grab their phone number, grab their email, because even after this ends, we're available to you all to knock down the list of your housing to-do list in your communities. So thanks, Warren and Greater Minnesota Housing Fund for scheduling this. Certainly we know through the pandemic and even before the pandemic, housing needs are changing, they're growing, they're significant, they're pervasive in Greater Minnesota. And our effort has increased throughout the pandemic to try and meet statewide needs. So since not likely all of you read our annual program assessment, I thought I'd share a few quick fun facts. Last year, the agency, we deployed $1.6 billion in total assistance to over 72,000 families across the state. And we know that's really just a drop in the bucket around needs, but it's certainly more than we've ever done. That's the largest amount of assistance we've deployed. And I think a little sneak peek, we're doing more currently as we speak due to federal resources. Last year, 49% of our resources, our competitive resources, went to the Metro and 51% went to Greater Minnesota. So we certainly look at all of our resources. We might not have enough of the resources to meet your specific need, your specific project, but we certainly look across all of our resources to try to meet the regional needs and the regional priorities through all of our funding processes. So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more, gathering some intel, listening to you all in Central Minnesota, and appreciate the time this morning. Thanks, Warren.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I think next we're going to do a real quick instant poll. This is just something to help us see instantly who is in the room. And what popped up on your screen, hopefully just now, is the first question on this instant poll. If you could kind of self-identify your primary area of work, whether it's housing development or government or healthcare or lending. If you just pick one and hit submit, that result will show up on all of our screens and we'll kind of see the mix of our group today. There are actually 3 questions, so just kind of answer all 3 real quickly. You have about 30 seconds or so to kind of click through. So the first question is, what industry is your primary area of work? And we might see the answer. Oh, here are the answers. A lot of government, which is good. A lot of resources in government. A lot of lending, nothing in healthcare. Supportive services, of course, architecture, and a good amount of housing development. Then the next question is, which of these issues is most important to you? And again, on your screen, you'll see a list of issues ranging from homelessness to homeownership to advocacy and building new and preserving affordable housing and so forth. You can pick 3. We'll kind of get a sense of what your priorities are if you will click on 3 topics there, and we'll see the instant answers as soon as most of you have responded, just to see what people are most interested in here. It'll take a minute or so for everybody's answers to show up. And then we'll see the answers. Okay, here are the answers. On the screen, you should be able to see that building new affordable housing is the major topic of interest, or the highest priority, followed by preserving affordable housing, followed by advocacy. We probably don't get a lot of housing built without a lot of advocacy. Ending homelessness is essentially tied, and then promoting home ownership and coordinating with employers. So those are the priorities of the people here today. And then do we have one last question, Jeremiah? Here it is. Last question, just to see who's in the room. This is about the COVID pandemic impacts in your community. We didn't quite know how to ask this question, but if if you sort of pick a level of impact or problems caused by the pandemic for your community, we'll get a sense of what people are observing and experiencing in their communities due to COVID as soon as we get all our answers tabulated there.
We have about 50% of respondents to this one.
Yeah, so we'll see those answers in just a second. High impact, of course. So great. Thanks for doing that. What we're going to do now is go into this is also just a little bit of a interaction exercise. We're going to have a 10-minute breakout session. We'll all be randomly placed in a small group. And what we'd like you to do, just to kind of get our conversation flowing within the attendees and the speakers together, just while you're in the small group, if each of you could just mention your name and organization and your particular interest in housing and a little bit about why you're here today. We'll be split into that group, and in 10 minutes, we'll automatically be rejoined together in the large group. So have a good conversation. See you in 10 minutes. Panel number one is setting the stage, the changing workforce and housing needs of our diverse communities. And our facilitator is Cameron Macht, regional analyst and outreach manager for DEED, or Minnesota Department of Economic Development. And Cameron will present demographic data on the central region. And then he'll introduce our other panelists, who I won't introduce right now. And then Cameron will facilitate the discussion on the housing needs in the region as they are affected by the changing demographics of the area. So Cameron, thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Warren. Good morning, everyone. And thanks so much for the opportunity to be a part of this event. As you may have noticed, I'm actually pinch hitting for Luke Greiner, who is the regional labor market analyst for Central and Southwest Minnesota. He's not with us today, but I was able to jump in. My goal is to help set some context for the discussion today with the demographic changes that are occurring in the region. So if you go to the next slide here. Perfect. Okay, so really we're just going to be scratching the surface of what we have available. So please feel free to reach out to Luke Greiner or me or anyone else on our team with any questions that you might have. So if we look up until 2010, central Minnesota was actually the fastest growing region of the state, more than doubling in population over the past 50 years. However, central Minnesota was the second fastest growing region over the past decade, behind the Twin Cities metro area. Several counties in the region are still among the fastest growing in the state, but have slowed down in recent years. And certainly some of that is due to the lingering effects of the Great Recession and the foreclosure crisis in the early 2010s. But the slowdown is also due to the aging of the population and changing migration patterns that are happening within the region. You can click to the next slide there. So over time, the region's population has grown due to a huge influx of young married couple families, as well as a large but aging baby boom generation that has made its way up through the population pyramid over the past 2 decades. You can see in figure 3 that that huge group was between the ages of 35 and 54 in 2000, and it's now between 55 and 74 years of age, many of those people reaching traditional retirement age and dropping out of the labor force. And of course, while the number of older residents is increasing in the region, not all of them are staying in the region or even in the state as they age. We can go ahead to the next slide. Beyond the changing age demographics, central Minnesota's population is also becoming more racially diverse over time. In 2019, 92% of the region's residents reported white alone as their race, compared to about 83% of residents statewide. The region had smaller percentages of every other race than the state, and at 3.7%, central Minnesota also had a lower percentage of people reporting Hispanic or Latino origin than the state. Most counties in the region have more than 90% of the population reporting white alone as their race, whereas a couple counties reported more diverse populations, thanks to large Black, American Indian, and Hispanic populations. What's important to point out, though, is that every other race group other than white was growing faster over the past 2 decades. And according to the State Demographic Center, that is projected to continue over the next 2 decades as well. All right, we can jump to the next slide. So as noted before, with a young and fast growing population, central Minnesota experienced a natural increase, which means that we had more births than deaths, of about 33,500 people so far this decade. In addition, the region also gained residents from in-migration, with 6,500 more people moving into the region than moving out. However, this was marked by domestic outmigration, which means that more people moved out of the region to other parts of the state or other states than moved in. The sun is shining here, but it's starting to get pretty cold. And so you can understand why some people in those groups have decided to move to warmer areas, at least during the winter months. The good news is that the region did experience positive in-migration of nearly 9,000 additional residents from international sources. The fastest growth within the region was from Africa, but the region also saw gains from Latin America and Asia. The foreign-born population is much younger than the native-born population, with a much higher percentage of people in their prime working years, between 25 and 54 years of age, and are much more likely to be participating in the labor force than the native-born population. All right, let's jump ahead one more slide. So the entire region is projected to continue growing through 2043, adding nearly 48,000 new residents over the next 20 years. However, the state overall is expected to grow 9.4% between 2023 and 2043, a gain of more than 545,000 new residents. Again, a lot of that population growth is expected to happen in the 7-county Twin Cities metro area. Regions, counties, and local areas will need to react to these changing demographic trends over time. And it's also going to have a pretty significant impact on the available labor force. In fact, the region will likely see declining labor force participation rates over time as the population ages and more of the region's population enters into the oldest age groups, either at or past traditional retirement age. So you can click to that last slide. So as you may have seen in yesterday's press release, Minnesota's unemployment rate is back to pre-pandemic levels. This shows that people are getting back to work, but also reflects that many people have dropped out of the labor force. This is true in central Minnesota as well. If you ever want more information about employment trends or population trends in central Minnesota, please contact Luke Greiner. You can see his contact information there, or reach out to me, and we'll do whatever we can to help you. Again, this is just hopefully a short overview to help set the context for the meeting today. So hopefully that is helpful. With that, I think we'll move into introducing our panel and allowing them to go around and share some information about where they're from. And I have 2 specific questions for them as well. So we have a panel of 4 different experts. And I apologize if I pronounce any of your names incorrectly. Please correct me when you come on. But the first is Luann Thomas Brunkhorst. She's the director of the Long Prairie Chamber of Commerce. Her focus area is Long Prairie workforce housing and challenges due to the lack of housing. Next is Mary Riegert. She's the Continuum of Care Coordinator for the Minnesota Tribal Collaborative. We just heard that 6 different tribes that she's representing. Their focus area is building power and self-determination of communities most impacted by housing challenges and disparities. Third is BJ Allen. She's with the Region 5 Development Commission. Her focus area is the availability of and access to housing for Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe members. And then finally, Enrique Blanco, the operations director at the Latino Economic Development Center. His focus area is housing and workforce needs of the Latino community in Minnesota's central region. So with that, I'll invite each of the panelists to come on and briefly describe their organization and the focus area of their work within their organization. And then probably the more interesting and exciting question to answer, or difficult question to answer, is 2020 was a year of unrest. How was your organization and the communities it serves impacted during the COVID pandemic? What stands out as the most vexing challenges that your stakeholders have encountered, especially related to diverse populations? And this can cover things like homelessness, rent burden, job loss, or more. Each panelist will get a couple minutes to respond, and then we'll come back and ask a third question. So I'm not sure if there is a certain order that the panelists are supposed to go in. Without seeing one, I'll just hand it over to Luann, and I hope that I pronounced your name correctly.
Oh, good. First. Okay, good morning. My name is Luann Thomas Bronkhorst. You did pronounce my name correctly. And I'm the Long Prairie Area Chamber of Commerce Director, and I'm also an assistant for the EDA. Due to the fact that my chamber members are businesses in Long Prairie area, I hear about their struggles with workforce, childcare, and housing. In my job as chamber director, I primarily work with solutions for workforce. I post jobs, offerings, openings on Facebook and on our website, and I host a career fair. However, workforce, as you all know, childcare and housing issues are all interrelated. Those are the 3 pillars I'm working towards. In my work with the EDA, I work with Todd County Development on childcare solutions, and I follow what is being done to help the housing needs of our community as well. And the question of COVID, and I told Jeremiah when he asked me, I am not the data queen. I hear stories. I listen to my business members. I try to find solutions. But with COVID, I did not hear much about COVID effects on the housing market. I've heard childcare and also workforce. But I do believe that some landlords did not get paid due to COVID-related policies. And I talked to HRA, Kim Wallace yesterday. Inspections of properties were basically non-existent for about 1.5 years, 2 years. So that's a bit dangerous, yeah. Keeping the quality up. I believe is that, and then what stands out, vexing challenges. The most vexing challenges that businesses, the HRA, or any newcomer faced during the pandemic and now is just the lack of housing. All the apartments in town, C.S. Nelson, Timmerman Apartments, Second Avenue, Golf Course Apartments, the Hart Mall, and other townhomes are full. I mean, they're just full. People come into my office. Oh, and they also have waiting lists. Low-income residents have little or no chance of getting affordable housing, according to Kim Wallace of HRA. Workforce from the packing plant and other manufacturers' businesses have employees staying at hotels. People come into my office and ask for housing suggestions, and all I can give them is the housing list that's for realtors on our chamber website, on our city website. And most of the time they said they've called all of them. To add to the problem is the rates of housing going crazy. 2-bedroom, $1,200, 3-bedroom, $1,500. And Todd County, by the way, is we have 63% of our school has free and reduced lunches. So, and then the Hart Mall and the Second Avenue are more reasonable, but Second Avenue is a brand new facility and it's still too expensive for HRA costs requirements. And they are full. I saw Skip on the call. Congratulations. And in regards to the question about diverse population, Long Prairie has a Latino population of about 40%. And I go with my sons. My one son is 14. He went into kindergarten and there are 52% Hispanics. Then we had the hurricane in Puerto Rico. And then we had an influx of 250 new families. And so now in the kindergarten, it's 63% are Latinos and Hispanics. So I think I covered everything there, except for the fact that the Latinos are now a large part of our workforce. And our packing plant is the largest business we have in town, our manufacturer, and it's got 500 to 600, about 600 employees. And I would say, I did not ask her yesterday, Elizabeth, who's the HR manager, what the percentage is. I think it's over 70% Latinos. So, thank you.
Fascinating information. And I'm sure there are probably some other regional centers kind of like yours that have that manufacturing concentration that really has brought in a larger Hispanic or Latino population over time.
Oh, and I forgot to say, the nice thing also is now some of them are starting businesses. They're entrepreneurs downtown. We have 10 or more businesses that have been purchased, buildings that have been purchased and are being used for retail and housing. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic news. I'm actually located in Wilmer, and Wilmer has gone through very similar population changes over time. So, well, thank you very much. All right, next I will turn it over to Mary Riegert. If you can unmute yourself and jump in. Same set of questions for you, Mary.
Thanks, Cameron. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Riegert. Sorry. I am the coordinator for the Minnesota Tribal Collaborative to Prevent and End Homelessness. I've been in this role since March, and so still relatively new in it, but many years of experience in working with the homelessness for our Native people. While I worked for the White Earth Nation for 16 years prior to that. So, but our organization is a group of tribal nations that came together back in 2014 when the state of Minnesota first allowed tribal entities to apply for their long-term homeless funding. And part of doing that, to apply for that, is they were looking for collaborative applicants. And so we, 6 tribal nations came together and did a memorandum of understanding through their tribes to form the Minnesota Tribal Collaborative. And those 6 tribal nations include Mille Lacs, Red Lake, White Earth, Bois Forte, Fond du Lac, and Leech Lake. And so, I was asked to come on to be a part of this panel, representing more so like Mille Lacs, the Mille Lacs band. But throughout the northern Minnesota. I represent all of our tribal organizations through the collaborative in that effort. And we really just, our main focus is to address disparities in racial equity and try and ensure that we are at the table and our voice is heard as decisions are made that impacts our Native relatives. As far as how was my organization, the communities it served, impacted during the COVID pandemic, many of our tribal casinos, specifically to Mille Lacs, had to shut down during the surge of COVID. And that was a loss of a lot of revenue for our tribes. And a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people were then, because the revenue was gone, and that revenue pays for positions throughout the government, they laid off many people, from directors to managers to casino floor employees. And so that then made it, those people that stayed behind that were able to keep their jobs were doing 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs at a time, because there was no one else there to do those positions. So specifically, like I was talking with Tammy Moreland out of Mille Lacs, and she was delivering food to people in the community. And it took away the ability to provide service to our homeless people because we were doing so many other jobs. And so, throughout the tribes, that was one of the big things that we've heard is service. Because of staff capacity, the services just weren't there. And so a lot of people that were on their way to being more stable and having, stability in their homes, they lost that stability because the supportive services and stuff were not there to help them. So that was a huge impact in our tribal communities. What stands out as the most vexing challenge? I don't know. There was a lot of challenges. It's from not being able to get reports done to our, to funding agencies, to not helping people, there was just many, many things. On a positive note, on the COVID, from COVID, is there was more funding available for homelessness than there's ever has been, with your SARA funds and all of those funds through this, state of Minnesota and federal funds. So that was definitely a positive. I'm not looking forward to once those funds go away, because then we're going to be back exactly where we were. But I think that's about it.
Yeah, thank you. That is certainly going to be a challenge. Deed is in the same position. We've got more money flowing in from the federal government than we've ever had before. It was interesting too, you pointed out, like the higher incidence of unemployment in the American Indian communities due to the shutdowns last year. We definitely saw that in our unemployment insurance data, both higher concentrations and longer durations for American Indians. But I guess the good news is, things definitely do seem to be bouncing back. Like we showed a record number of job vacancies in arts, entertainment, recreation over the summer. So hopefully that's a good sign.
Also, we need to clean up this plot back here.
Doing what?
I'm gonna clean up the plot back here.
It sounds like we got somebody else sharing information. All right, so next we'll jump over to BJ. Same questions for you. Just talk quickly about your organization and what happened in 2020. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Cameron. And it's so great to have Deed as a resource for all the data. And thanks for that summary. And it was great to hear from Luann and Mary too. I really appreciate your input, and I'm excited to hear the other panelists as well. I'm here representing Region 5 Development Commission, which is one of 9 regional development organizations in the state of Minnesota. We're based in Staples, and we serve a 5-county region in north central Minnesota, Cass, Crow Wing, Morrison, Todd, and Wadena counties. We undertake regional economic development initiatives and community development, and we conduct planning work in the region, including safe routes to schools, pandemic planning, energy and environment planning. One of the things that Region 5 does, and we commit to do, is to listen to the community, and we take polls regularly. And so we adjust our priority areas based on what the community is telling us they need. And we have been hearing a lot lately about housing needs, and we have been hearing it for a number of years from the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, which is in Cass County primarily. And so we worked with Leech Lake Tribal College specifically and a number of other entities earlier this year to develop a proposal to EDA to expand the workforce training facility up at Leech Lake Tribal College. So right now they offer a carpentry trades program, and this workforce training grant, if it comes through, would expand their construction trades program to include plumbing, electrical, and other trades as well. I think that one of the things that has been apparent with all of the housing needs that have been discussed in the region is that we also need more trained construction workforce. And also the construction industry has higher paying jobs than a lot of the other jobs in our region. You know, our region is really focused on tourism, the tourism industry. Those jobs are typically low paying, oftentimes part-time, and a lot of times seasonal. And that's been one of the issues with the pandemic, is that the people that work those jobs, if they did get unemployment, the benefits weren't enough to meet their basic needs. So we'll find out if we get invited for a full application for that grant opportunity in December. So please keep your fingers crossed, because it's a really exciting project. And the Leech Lake Tribal College has some really, really exciting ideas. One of their ideas is one of the things that they've noticed that is an issue, in terms of them meeting their housing needs. It's going to be a years-long effort to meet their housing needs right now. They have a waiting list of over 400 people, and they also have a homelessness situation. And because of overcrowding, that's also been exacerbated the death toll on the Leech Lake Band during the pandemic. So one of the ways that the Leech Lake Tribal College is interested in pursuing to resolve the issue of being able to meet those housing needs as quickly as possible is they want to get a 3D printer on site, which would be really, really interesting and exciting. If you haven't checked out any YouTube videos on 3D house printers, check it out. It's very, very cool. They're also interested in experimenting with hempcrete for construction materials. It apparently acts as a carbon sink once a building is up. So that's also really, really innovative and exciting. One thing that I wanted to mention in terms of one of the vexing challenges, besides what I already discussed, is that that disproportionate death toll in tribal communities. Leech Lake actually recorded its highest number of cases in the entire pandemic just this fall. So again, as Warren was mentioning earlier on, the pandemic is unfortunately not over. And so the mental health toll also has been really severe and for everyone. And, sort of as an ancillary thing, there's also been this breakdown in civility, and maybe part of that is because we're on Zoom calls instead of interacting with each other more. I don't know exactly, but that's also just exacerbated this mental health toll the pandemic has caused. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All great points. Yeah, the pandemic is definitely still with us. Obviously, it would be nice to be all together in the same place, but virtual meetings have been helpful during this time frame. And it's interesting too that you bring up the workforce shortage in construction, because that definitely is an industry that is struggling to find workers, and more diverse workers as well. So finally, I will hand it over to Enrique. Same set of questions for you.
Thank you, Cameron, and thank you everyone for this opportunity. We're delighted to be here and share with you what we've seen in the Latino community. I'm Enrique Blanco. I'm the Director of Operations at the Latino Economic Development Center. We're a nonprofit Latino led and focus on economic development for the Latino community in Minnesota. We do work in the Twin Cities metro area, and as well in greater Minnesota, and central Minnesota being one of the areas we serve. We have seen a lot of challenges in 2020, and we continue to see those, especially affecting our constituency, who are immigrants and first or second generation Latinos that are here in the state. There's been a lot of challenges for our community, both in the metro area and in greater Minnesota. It was a whirlwind when we first got into the pandemic, and we started seeing all these things, the executive orders or the stay-at-home orders from the governor were impacted a lot of our community members, just because of the type of work they do. And they obviously started having challenges in meeting their bills and being able to pay rent and all that. So through the Minnesota partnership with the Minnesota Housing and Financing Agency, we're able to step in and be one of the administrators that helped out with rent for Minnesotans. It wasn't only Latino, it was just Minnesotans. And we served a percentage of that, obviously, was people that identified as Latinos. And one interesting thing that we saw when we were helping these people, especially Latinos, they were hesitant to receive the help. They just were nervous and anxious about not being able to meet their rent. And if I can share one thing with you, is that in the Latino community, especially when you're immigrant, you secure your home. You might cut down on other things like meals or other non-essential things, but you pay your rent. And for a Latino family facing probably not being able to work and seeing that they're not going to be able to get paid and make the rent, it's a very, very hard situation. So for the Minnesota Housing Agency, Housing and Financing Agency stepping in and partnering with us so that we could help out and be that liaison between the help and the community was key. And we were really, really thrilled to do that job, because we helped a lot of Latino families being able to get the assistance. And that was a big win for us and for the community. Challenges that we're still seeing, I mean, it's hard to pick. It's still like all of the above: homelessness, rent burden, job loss. They're all problems and challenges that we're facing, and we continue to face because these are some of these issues are systemic, and until those are addressed, we will see this in different forms. At this point, we're really trying to make the most that we can, so that Latinos get the employment and training that they need. That's part of our programs that we do. Agriculture workers get the training so that they can start owning their own farms and being able to do what they know how to do. And in the metro area, helping entrepreneurs in central Minnesota, just like you were saying, it's a lot of entrepreneurs who have been pushed to doing that, to entrepreneurship, because they find no work, or the work they're doing is not really something that is well paid. So they turn into entrepreneurship to be able to provide a job for themselves and provide an income for their families. So it's trying to support everyone and helping, stepping in any capacity that we're called to do, and in order for us to create a thriving Latino community. But I think it's a broader challenge, and I'm glad that there's a host of people here and organizations that we working together, we can try to address this from the root and then make a change that stays. And I think that's key. We partnered with Minnesota Deed, and we've been able to provide direct financial assistance through the grants, and we continue to do that. And I think those are key. Beyond that, then we need to be thinking collectively and being able to try to answer and solve the challenges that we're facing. So from us, if there's a commitment to all of you and to be working together in any way that we can help. That's what we pledge to you, and that's what we want to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that the key really is being connected to the community and the partnerships that we're able to build. And, you know, the idea of getting training to help people keep moving up is excellent as well. So we have about 15 more minutes here. We have one more question we'll do across the panel as well again. So this one is, what grassroots or grass tops examples have you seen that have worked, and what recommendations would you make for future actors, including elected officials, funders, employers, and community organizations, which will help advance racial equity and inclusion? So we'll have about 4 minutes each for the panel, if we can, and then we'll just go around again. I'll start, if it's okay, I'll start with Luann again.
Okay,
Put you
yeah.
in the spot twice.
That's okay. I could start with the packing plant here in town. Not everything is rosy. However, they are really doing their best right now to deal with childcare and housing issues. And they started with the housing insofar as they have a hotel in Alexandria, and it's 45 units with 90 employees, and they have 3 months there. And they only pay $200 a month for rent. So they earn enough to possibly get a down payment for rent and or for a house. So that's one initiative that they're taking. I did hear from Daybreak Egg Plant that they have a few, not as many as the packing plant. They also have hotels, a hotel for some of their workers. They also financially backed the Second Avenue apartments. So it would be nice if more, or if we could get more businesses, more manufacturers to back housing financially. And Skip, I see, is on the call and or on the meeting. And he will be talking more towards that as to how much the packing plant supplied him with. The city helped with TIF. So that made it possible that the packing plant had some housing for their people, and of course for our entire town. They also have this program where there's forgivable home ownership loan up to $5,200 for a down payment, closing costs, 0 interest. And they don't have to be first-time buyers, and it would be the purchase of a single 2-family home or condominium. And the HR is really very vested in this, and they sit down and go through the application with them. And they have now a new marketing person who markets who bought a house in town from the packing plant. And then you see the house, they say, oh, nice. They now have a house, and they may have been here for 2-3 years, and now they're buying a house. So that's very proactive. And then the question about advancing racial equity and inclusion. The University of Minnesota Extension and the Initiative Foundation has supported the Chamber and a group called VIDA in a program called The Wave, welcoming advocates, valuing everyone. And the city has given us a space where we, in the library building next to the Chamber of Commerce, so that there are lots of resources there for any newcomer, and then also bilingual capabilities, interpreting. And thank you, Enrique, Monica Segura Schwartz is there once a week now. She's with the Latino Economic Development, and she has already seen entrepreneurs on Main Street and helping them with their business plans. And so we're just very excited about advocating and finding resources for them in healthcare, childcare, housing, employment, and driver's license. Big thing. It used to be in our building, but it's no longer in our building, but it's coming back in February. We called state representatives and said, hey, we need it back because of our population. So I believe that's everything.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example. I was actually going to ask about that. Does the business provide any transportation between the hotel and the plant?
Yes, they do. They have the Executive Express. They have people coming from St. Cloud in an Executive Express, and then people coming from Alexandria with the Executive Express, both ways.
Awesome. Also supporting an entrepreneur then too.
Exactly.
Cool. Those are great, very concrete examples. Thank you. Next, we will move on to Mary.
Thank you, Cameron. Grassroots and grass tops examples. Well, I will say on behalf of the Tribal Collaborative, we are the only tribal kind of entity that works towards ending homelessness in the state of Minnesota, and as far as we know, in the United States. And so to bring this group of tribes together to ensure racial equity has been very innovative and challenging, but it's still there. We've worked with one of the main accomplishments that we've done as a tribal collaborative from the grassroots live spot is we worked with Senator Tina Smith's office specifically to ensure that tribes are eligible for HUD funding through the COCs. Prior to December of 2020, that bill was passed based on us working with Senator Smith's office to now allow tribes to apply for HUD funding. We had never been able to do that. And so I'm curious now that the NOFO is done for the COC funding, how many tribal entities did actually apply, because that's going to be a challenge still for our tribes. We've never been able to do that. And many of our COCs throughout the nation have done it for 20 years. And so lots of that, we need a lot of technical assistance and how that's going to work. And ensuring that we are now that we're eligible, that we can do it. So that, I guess recommendations would be to, like our elected officials, when things like that, funders, make sure tribal voices are at the table. That when, we always say nothing about us without us, because so many decisions that have been made in history have affected Native people. And so we really just want to be there from the beginning and not come in the back end. So, you know, like I said, as far as like employers, you know, making sure that there's people of color in leadership positions, in management positions, so that, you know, we know our people the best and how to work with them. And so allow us to do that. And kind of, you know, so that would be the other thing I would say, make sure those people of color faces are there as employers and in your communities. You know, when you have your Lions meetings or whatever it may be, that people of color are included, specifically Native people within the northern part of Minnesota here, because, you know, the tribes are a large number of the community in northern Minnesota. So I think, yeah, I think that's what I'd say on it, Cameron.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent recommendation. You know, having representation at those boards makes a huge difference. And it kind of sounds like you guys by yourselves are a really good grassroots example of how you can work toward racial equity and inclusion. So thank you for what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I will jump over to BJ.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. Well, Region 5 operates a program that sounds pretty similar to what Luann was talking about, the WAVE program. We call it Welcoming Communities, and it is right now running in 7 different cities throughout the region. And each municipality gets to design their own program. So whatever works for that individual community, whatever they need in order to make the community welcoming, they design the program themselves. So we've actually been running this program since 2017, and we have taken a lot of heat for it. So we've been picketed, we've received death threats, and we've actually lost committed, talented people out of our region directly because of their involvement in this welcoming communities work. So this clearly makes us understand that we need to continue work to make our communities more welcoming. And, you know, courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. And so I think that one of the things that we need to do, echoing what Mary said, you know, we need to invest in entities that are doing the work in the communities. We need to build the add technical assistance, increase the capacity, have outside agency mentorships and guidance to navigate those existing systems. And then also, I think that investing in healing spaces or opening up some healing spaces, people who are engaged in activism can get tired. It's can be difficult work sometimes. So having some supportive spaces for people to talk to each other could really help. And sharing success is another way that we can support each other. And finally, I think on an individual level up to the community level, I think one of the things that we can all do is to listen and be curious, continue to be curious. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak, but courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. Thanks.
Excellent points. Just to key on one of the things you said, it really is important to celebrate those success stories when you see things going right. You know, hold that up as an example of what we want to see moving forward. So last but not least, I will hand it over to Enrique.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. Yeah, just to echo what Luann and Mary and BJ were saying, I think it's around partnerships, because we're people of color, and one way or another we'll share some of the same situations. And if one of our organizations are serving another community of color, there's a big possibility that someone from another community might reach out, just like Luann. They have the partnership with us. Now, our team member, she's partnering with them, and then they can refer people who need the help, and we have presence there. And I think working together is a great grassroots example, and it can be used as a strategy to support each other, and being together and going together and doing the work, because we will find people of color, and it might not be from the Latino community, but it might be from the Native American community, and we can support each other. I know Mary, and I can say, hey, if you need support, we can, I know someone who can, might be able to help you, and the same with Luann and BJ and anyone else on this call. I think that's a way that we can be walking this path and through this journey together. And my ask is for funders and elected officials is to invest in our organizations, because we do the work. We know the people, just like Mary was saying, and we can listen to them, understand what they're going through, and act on that. So it takes an investment. It's not a handoff. It's not anything like that. It's an investment for the future. So that's how I think, and we're committed to working through this. Partnerships with the Initiative Foundation, the Southwest Initiative Foundation. It's I mean, partnering with everyone is key for us, and being able to overcome some of these bigger challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, thank you so much. So this has been excellent. A big thank you to the panelists for the information that they shared. And I know that, in every case, really, we're probably just scratching the surface of the things that we have going on and the resources that we can help provide to all of you. So, hopefully this first panel has helped set that context for people to understand, there are all of these organizations. We're happy to work together. A lot of partnerships are already in place, but there's still opportunities for more to make changes within our region. I assume everyone on the call, everyone on the panel is open to receiving follow-up questions. So please feel free to reach out to us afterwards. We're happy to help in any way that we can. Thank you again to the panelists. Thank you, Warren and Jeremiah, for inviting us to do this. I will hand it back over and hope you have a great rest of the morning.
Thank you, Cameron. And thanks, Luann, Mary, BJ, and Enrique for sharing your perspectives and your suggestions and insights and examples of ways that we can be more inclusive throughout the state and make opportunity more available to everybody. We're just about to go into a little breakout session to socialize this topic so that everybody can have an opportunity to talk about this, with, a group of 4 people for just a few minutes and just kind of talk about your takeaways from that conversation. So during this breakout session, as you can see on the screen, just as a guide, you can be more organic than this too, but in your small group, why don't you try to each say a few words about what was surprising or particularly interesting or particularly encouraging from our speakers or from your own experience. And what equity issues do you see as important in your community or in the communities you work in? And maybe there are other local initiatives that are happening that you can share briefly in this short breakout session. And you have the option to click on the join and you'll go to a particular room. Yeah, we should be bouncing back into the main room. Hopefully everybody's pretty much here at this point. So thanks everybody for having that discussion for just 10 minutes. and what your takeaways were. We had a really interesting, but short, a small group discussion that I'll just mention a couple of the takeaways that came out of our group, which was Enrique emphasized again the value of partnership, and that LEDC and the tribes, you know, these BIPOC organizations and organizations, they're not the ones that are going to be able to make it happen. They're the lead, the thought leaders and the builders of awareness, but it really requires a broader community base of partnerships. And then Becky and our staff in our small group mentioned how it was new and disturbing information for her to hear that death threats were being used against people who were trying to empower people of color and change some of the things to be more equitable in their community, and that that really indicates how important this is to overcome those kinds of obstacles and make things safer for people to work on. Anyway, right now, moving on to essentially our second panel, we're going to have a panel on resources and policy updates. And so we'll start out by having an update on state and federal policy. And that'll move into some other discussions about new program resources. But our speakers will include Minnesota Housing Partnership, and Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. But first off, Alyssa Wetzel-Moore, the Community Development Director at Minnesota Housing, will update us on federal and state housing policy and introduce the other three panelists. So welcome, Alyssa, again, and also welcome Libby, Irene, and Eric, who will be the speakers after Alyssa.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us at this really important regional conversation. I know I've said this in the breakout, but I really miss being out and being able to be together in person. It's just really nice to feel that connection. So at least virtually, I'm giving you a warm handshake and wish we could talk over some coffee. So as I've been introduced, my name is Alyssa Wetzel-Moore. I'm Community Development Director at Minnesota Housing. I am here to both provide a legislative update and then a brief overview of Minnesota housing resources. I plan to keep it very high level, more with the idea that some of my very excellent colleagues are available in the breakout sessions for more in-depth conversation. So I wanted to start off with the state and federal updates. And again, I'll just give a brief overview of the resources and then turn it over to my other panelists. So on the state level, the agency is gearing up for the state legislative session, which starts at the end of January. Minnesota Housing will be requesting additional resources for a wide range of housing needs, both for homeownership and rental activities. We do like to say, you know, the agency is only 0.3% of the state budgets, and we know that the needs for housing resources are huge. So we will continue to push for more resources to help communities and people meet their housing needs. We do anticipate significant focus on bonding and capital investment this year, and we're asking the governor for $250 million in housing infrastructure bonds, which is the largest source of capital we get from the state. And we can use that to fund new and rehab rental housing, single-family homes, and manufactured housing. And then in addition to capital investment, we'll be asking for resources from the federal COVID State Fiscal Recovery Fund and the general fund. And then we'll also continue to make the case that housing, and particularly housing development, is a great way to invest one-time resources. And then a brief federal policy update. We're closely watching and working with our federal elected officials and staff. While the infrastructure bill that was just recently signed became law, it did not include housing provisions. We are anticipating some significant federal housing resources in the next bill called Build Back Better. That bill has several critical steps remaining but currently has significant housing resources, including additional housing tax credits and development programs. So the good news is we have strong bipartisan support from our federal delegation on the issue of housing. As I mentioned, I do have just some very brief resource updates, but I think to kind of keep the topic areas flowing, I'm going to turn it over to Libby Murphy with Minnesota Housing Partnership to give some policy updates as well. Over to you, Libby.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Libby Murphy. I'm the Director of Policy at Minnesota Housing Partnership. And I apologize if you hear a crying baby in the background. I did not anticipate that this morning. But I just wanted to kind of give us a real quick recap on what happened at the end of last session. At the end of last session, Minnesota Housing concluded session with an additional 10 million in one-time funding, as well as 100 million in housing infrastructure bonds. And that's really, I think, important to emphasize just how much the legislature has come to value and recognize the importance of housing infrastructure bonds. Yet last year was a non-bonding year. And so for housing infrastructure bonds to move outside of a larger bonding bill and in the omnibus housing package is a really big deal. This is, I believe, the second time that happened, and there's really no other issue area that's been able to accomplish that. So that's huge. And then there was new resources through the tax bill, including a new state affordable housing tax credit, as well as some county aid to address youth homelessness. So that's also big. The tax committee beginning to recognize that it has a role to play with the additional resources that committee has. This year is going to be very interesting. There's a lot of resources available at the table. There's 1.2 billion in federal funds that the legislature has to allocate this year. If they don't come to an agreement, that money will go to the governor to allocate, but that just pushes all the timelines back. In addition to that 1.2 billion of federal funds, there's also a significant surplus at this of general funds, something close to 3 billion. We won't know the final numbers until the November forecast comes out in early December. What's interesting is that Minnesota is constitutionally obligated to pass a balanced budget in its odd numbered years. So technically the legislature doesn't have to do anything in this upcoming year. It passed its balanced budget last year. It does not have to pass a supplemental budget. If it didn't come to an agreement on those federal funds, Governor Walz would have the ability to allocate those funds. And it is going to be contentious on how the legislature wants to spend those funds going into a critical election year for all lawmakers next year. As well as the governor. So that's just some important context. It's usually a big bonding year in these even numbered years. We know that Minnesota Housing is requesting 250 million in housing infrastructure bonds. I believe it's 60 million in GEO bonds. I think Alyssa mentioned it. Advocates will be asking for 500 million, I believe, 400 million in housing infrastructure bonds and 100 million in GEO bonds, as well as the Homes for All Coalition, which Minnesota Housing Partnership participates in, is asking for a significant amount in supplemental dollars to go to a number of activities, including NOAA preservation, local housing trust funds, new production, and a whole host of other things. So I think those are the biggest issues. And then I'll just say on the policy front, we're kind of in the same place that we've been in the past several years, but we won't be contesting with the eviction moratorium that kind of hung over all of the policy discussions and even the funding discussions in the last legislative session. So we negotiated a phase out, and we're in the process of implementing that phase out. So that will be something that lawmakers won't have to grapple with this next session. But there will still be some significant policy differences between the Senate GOP and the House DFL. And those include the Senate looking at how to reduce costs, how to address housing affordability, which is different than affordable housing. So how do we use cost saving measures as well as regulatory reform to bring down the cost of a moderate priced house so that it's more affordable to more moderate incomes. Then the House DFL is still very much focused on things around tenant protections. And we know that because of the success with the pre-eviction notice, that is something that's going to be a very big priority for Chair Hausman, who had announced her retirement earlier. So she's going to, as a former bonding chair, as well as somebody who has championed the Homes for All agenda, she's going to be going after big bonding dollars, as well as she has announced publicly that that policy issue around the pre-eviction filing or that notice period is going to be something that she's going to be focused on. I think that's the biggest things that I have for everyone. I'm happy to take questions kind of at the end of everyone's presentation.
Thanks so much, Livy. So now we'll turn it over to a discussion of resources. I just quickly wanted, because I wanted to keep the topics, I just didn't talk about some of the Minnesota housing resources. Some of you may be familiar with the various resources that we do offer, but just wanted to make sure that the group is aware. You know, we have both single family and multifamily dollars for development, preservation, and rehab. On the single family side, we do mortgage lending, down payment assistance, rehab loans through our lending partners, as well as homebuyer assistance and education. And that's really helped us make strides with homeowners, kind of addressing the homeownership gap, at least in our mortgage lending. And again, on the multifamily side, in addition to the development, preservation, and rehab, we have workforce, program supportive services, and then also housing assistance through a partner network. In addition, we have manufactured housing infrastructure dollars, as well as capacity building dollars that are run through a program that I oversee that's really about building communities. And so I just did want to just highlight again, please do join one of the breakout sessions if you're interested in single family, multifamily housing, or really want to speak to the qualified allocation plan and funding priorities. That's really the mechanism through which we deliver our select multifamily applications based for the development and rehab services. So we do want to get your input there. So just quick plug there, but now I do want to turn it back over to Greater Minnesota Housing Fund and specifically to Irene Ruiz-Briceño to talk about the great work that she's doing.
Thanks, Alyssa. Good morning. My name is Irene Ruiz-Briceño, and I am the program manager for Greater Minnesota Housing Fund's Emerging Developer of Color program. This newly launched program aims to increase the number of developers, landlords, entrepreneurs, and small business owners that are engaged in affordable housing development. So why is this important? It's because affordable housing developers of color are underrepresented and they often lack access to and networks within the industry. So Greater Minnesota Housing Fund wants to support individuals and organizations led by people of color in their growth as developers. So if you are a developer, you want to become a developer, or you're looking for support with a project such as an acquisition, a rehabilitation, or new construction project, you should contact us. We want to provide technical assistance, flexible project financing options, training resources, pre-development financing, and we do have some grant funding opportunities coming up. And we're really excited to be making those grant funds available right around December 1 for developers of color. Funds can be used to advance affordable housing projects or to receive training in affordable housing development. We're going to be sending out additional information, a link to the application, and some instructions on how to apply. It'll also be posted on our website. So if this is something that you are interested in keeping tabs on, please watch your inboxes or our website around December 1st for the full details about that funding opportunity. Additionally, this program also seeks to form partnerships with other organizations to support statewide efforts that reduce racial disparities in the housing industry and increase the impact and the effectiveness of existing programs and successfully advance common objectives. So we're aiming to form key partnerships in every region of the state. And if your organization is also supporting emerging developers in some way, we want to coordinate and collaborate with you. We want to align our existing programs. We want to work together to increase efficiency and the effectiveness of the programs that are out there. We want to leverage each other's efforts, strengths, and our resources for a greater impact. And we need to tap into your local expertise, which is why partnerships are going to be so critical, because we do want to serve all areas of the state. So we need that local expertise from organizations like yourself. And we do want to work together towards broader social and systems change, kind of on the bigger 10,000 foot level. So our vision is that through this program, Greater Minnesota Housing Fund can have a positive influence on driving changes within the industry. We want to work towards increasing the racial diversity within the affordable housing developer community. We want to see that the affordable housing market becomes more inclusive of developers of color and that more opportunities are shared with them. We want to see developers of color who are building assets, who are building wealth and generating income for themselves. We want to see developers of color contribute to the overall goal of producing and preserving affordable homes, which Minnesota so desperately needs. And finally, as more developers come to the market that reflect our diverse communities, the housing system is going to be better equipped to meet the needs of those diverse communities. So the main thing that I would like you to take away from this brief presentation is that we want to hear from you. Whether you're a developer, you want to become a developer, you have an idea for a housing project, or maybe you're with an organization whose mission aligns with ours, we want to hear about your projects and your programs. So feel free to reach out to me directly by phone or by email. And we'd love to hear about the creative and exciting initiatives happening in central Minnesota and talk about opportunities for GMHF to provide support. Thanks.
Thanks, Irene. That's so exciting. And I'm just in awe of how quickly you worked to get this up and off the ground. So very exciting. Next, I'll turn it over to Eric Muschler.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So my name is Eric Muschler, and I'm the new director of the Housing and Health Equity at the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. Greater Minnesota Housing Fund Housing and Health work started some time ago and was building momentum with the statewide summit that occurred in February of 2020. And COVID hit in March. And for very good reason, the initiative was put on hold while the healthcare industry proceeded with their heroic efforts in response to the pandemic. I just started last month, and it's a new position, and it's really meant to reboot the housing and health work at Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. We feel it's the right time to begin as there's signs that the pandemic is hopefully on its final wave, and everyone knock on wood with me with that. What we do know is the world changed over the last year and a half, and never has there been more clarity around the critical connections between housing and health. The other thing that happened in the last 18 months was a racial reckoning following the murder of George Floyd. These two events have helped us reframe the Housing and Health Equity Initiative with a recognition that health and equity is much broader than just connecting housing and health in supportive housing or service-connected housing. In fact, health and equity go hand in hand, and the need to be part of efforts to push our collective focus and our collective investments toward upstream solutions to community health and equity. The Housing and Health Equity Initiative will be working to create new partnerships across the fields of housing and health to prompt innovation and practice that address housing and other upstream solutions to improving community health. So in 2022, we'll be reconvening communities of practice and engaging organizations with the greatest interest in exploring these intersections and creative strategies and approaches to do work in the community. The goals and objectives that we will pursue include, number one, accelerated actions by key healthcare system partners to advance goals around decreasing racial disparities and improving community health, addressing social determinants of health. Number two, we'll be bridging healthcare, housing, community, and service sectors to create pipelines of innovative projects, programs, or strategies for improved community health, including traditional activities like supportive housing and building and preserving affordable housing. Number three, we want to be more proactively communicating the relationship and value of housing as a foundational element of community health and building out communities of practice networks to share learnings, report advancing opportunities, and provide peer support and competition to create innovative approaches and solutions. Finally, we hope to align and leverage more targeted resources and financing to advance innovative housing and health equity work that increase housing production and preservation, but also explores new areas that Greater Minnesota Housing Fund as a CDFI and healthcare institutions could support through investments in upstream solutions to community health and equity. So right now, I really just want to encourage everyone to share your stories with me. What are you working on? What are you pursuing? And housing and health equity projects that you wish to pursue, so that we can get a stronger read on the breadth of ideas and the sources of capital that are needed to advance significant partnerships across the fields of housing and health. So I hope you'll reach out to me via email or by phone. I did put my, did I do that? Yes, I did. I put my my email address and number in the chat, and you can get it at the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund website. So I really do look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to the small group discussions that are going to follow, because I think we also have a lot to learn, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Libby, Irene, and Eric. We definitely are looking forward to additional conversation. And again, especially with Irene and Eric's new role and new work, there's a lot going on in housing and health. So please do keep an eye out for these breakout rooms. And again, you can self-select the room where you'd like to join.
I think that wraps that session up, and thank you to everybody for that series of comments. Just to tag on a little bit to the comments made by Irene and Eric, of course, please contact Irene for that program, the Emerging Developer of Color program, and Eric for the Health and Housing and Health Equity program. One thing that Eric kind of mentioned in passing, but I'll just emphasize it a little bit more, is, of course, there's a lot of experience throughout the whole state in the area of health and housing, in the permanent supportive housing and homeless response work. We all know that that doesn't work without access to better health care and human services. And so that model is kind of a cornerstone of health and housing work. And we want to continue that and expand on that where we possibly can. And then look for other ways to partner with the healthcare system to garner their investments in affordable housing and partnerships with them. Right now, we're going to have a quick breakout session on these topics. You'll have a chance to talk directly with staff about the program updates that you heard. So please choose which room you want to go to. And there'll be a staff person or multiple staff people in that room to talk with you. We're going to have 5 breakout rooms, one for the QAP and the State Housing Finance Agency tax credit funding program. We'll have a room on single family housing with Minnesota housing staff and maybe our staff, and multifamily housing will be another room. And then we'll have a room for the developer of color capacity building and a room for health and housing equity. So feel free to pick a room now, and you'll be transported into that room. I think I'll move us along. I think everybody's out of their breakout room, and we're right on schedule. So for the next just a little less than an hour, we're going to talk about innovative projects and model projects. And this will include projects that have been recently developed or are even in the planning stages in the Central Region. And to lead us off, I'm glad to introduce Don Hickman, the Initiative Foundation's Vice President for Community and Workforce Development. And in his role, Don helps connect community leaders with helpful resources to create opportunities and improve the quality of life in Central Minnesota. Don will facilitate this panel and introduce our panelists. So I'll turn it over to you, Don.
Warren, thank you. It's such an honor to be here today. And one of the joys of my job is I hang out with people much smarter and who think much more deeply about the issues that interest me. As one of the earlier speakers said today, affordable housing is one of the three pillars that is at the root of the challenge of sustainable economic growth in central Minnesota. If we don't have housing, we're already challenged by demographics. If we don't have housing and childcare for our workers, they'll go someplace else. So really honored to host this panel today. I've got three speakers, and they're largely going to introduce themselves. The first speaker today is going to be Jason. Jason, would you introduce yourself? Give us a bullet of what the Central Minnesota Community Housing Partnership does, and then tell us about the White Oaks Estate Project in Baxter.
Sure. So as Don mentioned, I'm Jason Krebsbach. I'm the Community Development Director at Central Minnesota Housing Partnership. Our office is in St. Cloud, but we serve a 16 county service area in central and east central Minnesota. Our main focus is the development and preservation of affordable multifamily housing. We also do a few other odds and ends at CMHP. We administer the Small Cities Development Program through DEED. And we also house the Central Continuum of Care Coordinator and Coordinated Entry Coordinator. But today we're focusing on multifamily development. So I'm actually filling in for Deanna Hemish, my executive director. She's been a little under the weather. So I'm stepping in on short notice, and hopefully I give you some good information. But Don, do you want me to just jump in and kind of talk about White Oak Estates?
Please do.
Okay, so White Oak Estates, the idea for this project, which is located in Baxter, Minnesota, just about an hour north of St. Cloud, kind of sprung from a previous project that we had developed in North Branch called Willow Grove Apartments. It was a project, a 20 unit apartment building that was all 20 units were for individuals suffering or living with a severe and persistent mental illness. It was something new to CMHP. And through that project, which has now been operating for a couple of years, it's full. There's been some, it's been a learning curve, but we try to take what we learned there and bring it to Willow Grove, or excuse me, White Oak Estates, and not only fill a need for housing for people with severe and persistent mental illness, but also try and address just the general need for affordable housing in the Brainerd, Baxter, Crow Wing County area. So through communication with Region 5+ Adult Mental Health Initiative, other local support service providers, city and county officials and staff, kind of came up with a plan to provide housing for that population of people with severe and persistent mental illness, but also just kind of general family, our kind of standard housing tax credit template of just family affordable housing. We worked with some local banks and generated some contributions. And then we also had our development team, general contractor and architect, kind of work on some specific requirements of the site, but also trying to take these two projects, one project, but really kind of the severe and persistent mental illness side and what kind of specifics and changes we need to do to that building to make it more accommodating. And then we'll also doing a townhome development. So Jeremiah, if you want to flip the slide. So this was a new construction project that received, it was funded in 2019 through the Minnesota Housing RFP. Construction started and was completed, or actually started in late 2019, was completed in late 2020. It's 40 total units. We have 20 2- and 3-bedroom townhome units, which are tax credit units for family housing, and then a 20 unit apartment building, and that serves the individuals with severe and persistent mental illness. That apartment building has a 24-hour front desk, on-site support services available to those residents, and then just some general amenities, playground for the family, townhome buildings. It's connected to a trail system, comes right through the property. And then on the apartment side, it's got a very nice community room, some common space for tenants to get together and socialize. Next slide. So this project is a really good example of how a bunch of different sources can come together and be layered to get a project done. It wouldn't have happened without, as you can see on the screen, a large number of different sources. Obviously, MHFA was very integral in this, providing construction bridge loan, their Lemire First Loan program. Obviously, we have our 4% housing tax credit equity coming in, and then some secondary mortgage products through MHFA and home, some federal funds as well. We have some sales tax refund and energy rebates, and then also a deferred developer fee. So that's really how that project came together. I'll just wrap up by saying, with some questions that were sent out by Jeremiah to prep for this. Lessons learned on this project, I would say early collaboration, especially on the support service side. If it's a new process, it's a big learning curve. So starting those conversations really early is important. But I can say now this project is fully occupied. It's up and running. It's a beautiful piece of property and buildings, and we're appreciative of all the funding that was provided to make it happen. So,
thank you very much. Skip, you're up next. Luann spoke in the first panel of the day about the housing challenges in Long Prairie, a very vibrant community. And many of the employers have had to bus workers in for an hour away because housing has been such a limiting factor. And I've heard about your project. I'm dying to learn more because a lot of folks have held it up.
Thank you. Yeah, before I jump into my part, but to your comment, yeah, the meatpacking plant buses people for an hour back and forth from Alexandria, where they provide temporary housing, and the people can only live there for up to 90 days, and that's their time to find their own housing. So it's a little unique way of, and it's more of a dorm style housing. There's multiple people in rooms. It's not an ideal situation, but it's what they've been able to do to bridge this break-in time till somebody can find a place to live. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. One of the comments that the HR mentioned is, so you're living in Alexandria, you might be able to find a job in Alexandria and not have to do this anymore. And so they get people that just stay to work in Alexandria. So it doesn't always work. But anyways, I thought I'd answer that first. But I'm Skip DeShano. I'm the president of DW Jones in Walker. Our development team does affordable market rate and assisted living housing projects in greater Minnesota. Our market area is sort of north of St. Cloud and through to the borders. We also have a management arm that fee manages the properties we develop. We have site offices around the state. We manage approximately 3,500 units of market rate and affordable housing. As Luann had talked about, Second Avenue is Long Prairie's newest apartment building in town. We were happy to be a part of it. It is a 37 unit, 100% market rate property in Long Prairie. I would say, the typical amenities that you would see in a market rate project. The units have decks, there's in-unit laundry, there's a garbage chute, there's an 18-stall attached heated garage. There's a community room, a patio area with barbecue grills, a play area for kids, and it's pet friendly. The property opened June 1st of 2021 and was fully occupied in 90 days. Our contractor was Miller Construction and our architect was Cole Group Architects, which we work with both those firms on a number of projects. I think this project is interesting in that our team first tried to put an application together for the workforce housing grant program at Minnesota Housing Finance and couldn't get the numbers to work. And at the last minute, about 2 weeks before the application was due, we pulled the plug. And the Long Prairie Packing really wanted to have this project happen. And so Rick Utek from the county EDA reached out to us and says, what does the packing company need to do to make this project happen? And it started a process of us meeting, talking over the course of a year. We went to their corporate headquarters. Their parent company is a large company. They do about $2 billion a year in sales. And they really wanted to see something happen in Long Prairie. What happened through this year process is they became a 50-50 equity partner with us in the project. They also said, you know what, how about if we're the lender? We'll be the lender, we'll do a below market loan, virtually no closing costs. Okay, that's a good idea. We still had a problem with some gap, even with the money from Minnesota Housing Finance. And so they contributed some soft debt of $400,000 into the project as well to make it work. We're currently in the process of refinancing the building and working with HUD to refinance it and hopefully take out that debt. Yeah, if you want to go to the next one. So I included this slide just to give you a little idea of the rents that we're charging in Long Prairie on a market rate project. The building comprises of 2 efficiency units, 18 ones, 14 twos, and 3 threes. The market in Long Prairie is a little bit larger family size. We probably could have skewed this to more 3s and more 2s, but it's still rented up in 90 days. So you can see the rents range from about $750 to $1,115. This building does have a hot water baseboard heat, so rent does include heat, water, sewer, garbage. The tenants just really have electric and internet. So next slide. So our sources with this, the Rosen Diversified provided the first mortgage money as well as the TIF financing. The TIF was actually a hybrid. We used the workforce housing TIF, which was 9 years, and then we backed that with 5 years of tax abatement. This allowed us to not have any income restrictions come with that subsidy from the city, county, and school, and which is what the employer wanted, because they pay their employees such that if they wouldn't qualify for affordable housing. So that was a bit of a hybrid, and but it worked. We had great support from the county, the school, and the city for that tax abatement, and the TIF as well. The general partners, we each split the $350,000 cash equity into the project. We had some energy rebates, and then our loan or grant with Minnesota Housing Finance was for $1.3 million, which was flowed to the city and then the city into our project. And then you can see the final, the common capital of $400,000. Now this project, because of the size of the workforce housing program, it was over $500,000. It did require us to build prevailing wage, which added 12 to 14% additional cost to the project because of that string that comes with that grant program. I think the biggest lesson learned to me was to have an employer that does $2 billion a year in sales, to think that they might not think so micro, to work in a community that they have a huge housing shortage, that they can't come to the table. And they did come to the table in a big, meaningful way, from debt to soft debt to financing. And they've recently contacted us and asked us if we would build a project in South Dakota now for them, next to another plant. So we had a great relationship, and I think it was an exciting project to have an employer just step up to the plate this much.
That's an amazing story. No wonder I hear about you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Verna, you're the third panelist. You and I've known each other for about 10 or 20, 25 years, but I think for the last 10, we've been associated with this project where you took a Depression era high school to convert it into affordable housing. Would you share that story?
Well, one of the things that we would like to share is, first of all, that we started out with a wonderfully preserved building, a building that's been standing there above the city of Eagle Bend, and it was built in the era of the WPA. It has terrazzo floors, it's got open staircases, it's trimmed in polished granite, and it's made with many walls that are 3 feet thick in construction. So we started out with something that it was a monument to the WPA era. With the Art Deco, it's one of the rare buildings in the area that is still preserved and standing. One of the things that's interesting about this particular facility is that it has no load-bearing walls. In other words, you can take the walls out. It is a big cement box that gives us a lot of ability to work within that, to reconfigure interior walls and to redesign. Architects have talked to us about creating a facility that we preserve the Art Deco part of the building, the exterior part, the parts that are historical in nature. But when you step into your own apartment, you're stepping into your own world. And we're looking at creating up to 24 units of housing affordable for seniors. Our process has been a long and jagged one. I remember when I started this project back in the day, I was told that, there were a lot of times that the road would change in how we got there. And I am telling you, that's exactly what it's done. We started out as a committee under the city of Bertha, who was awarded the building through the legislature that was in 1917, along with $1.5 million to destroy the building. But the community actually pulled together, and actually one of the findings that we had is our first developer actually indicated that she had worked with communities in developing housing for seniors for 25 years, and she had never, ever seen a community that stood behind development like this one that they enforced so long, because it's been quite a long journey. So that's part of what's happened is the volunteerism, the community support has been so profound in this particular area that it's allowed us to take those turns and to step forward where they led us, and then to step back and reassess and go again. So one of the things we've done is reassess if there were any kind of business opportunities that we could develop there. And we didn't get a lot of feedback that was positive on that. So then we approached another area that was an issue, and that was to redesign a kitchen to serve meals to the area. And currently, as a result of that, we have remodeled the 1960s addition to the building, which is not pictured here. And we are serving meals to seniors statewide. Last year, they actually produced 120,000 meals in that facility. Due to COVID, there were additional meals. This year, they're on track to do 90,000 meals, serving 10 communities, doing shipments of 2 weeks worth of frozen meals to the outstate area. So, and there's also a dining area there, and there's some additional area that has not been redesigned as well. So that's one of the things that happened, and that was the zig and the zag, and it became available for us to apply for funding from South Country Health Alliance and through some programming through the Board on Aging or Central Minnesota Council on Aging. So partners, they were major partners in that particular project. So then moving on, we went back into reassessing what we were going to do with the main structure of the building. And another committee kind of redesigned itself with some new leaders, and we worked with the Center, University of Minnesota Center for Small Towns. And we did a survey of the community, and we found that what people were asking for was affordable housing. Many of the people who are primarily a lot of the seniors who need to retire are one-person household, primarily senior women. And those that have been working in the field and working through most of their adult lives will never be eligible for any kind of subsidized housing. So there's technically nowhere to go, because we probably did not have wages high enough during that time period to get a large check from retirement. And many of the people in the area do not have additional accounts for supporting their income. You know, it used to be that you could move into town from the farm, and if you had $10,000 after you sold your farm and bought a house, you could actually survive the rest of your retirement. But with longevity, things have really changed. And it really when we did that survey, it really put a focus on where that was done. We received 1,000, over 1,000 different responses to that survey. And it indicated that what people wanted was 1 or 2 bedroom units. They actually wanted to have parking for a car, so storage for a car. And they really wanted a lot of amenities close by, which really makes this particularly a good idea when you've got meals served and an area for socialization right next door. In addition to this building has an auditorium, and we were recommended by Senator Poston to move ahead and to apply for work on the auditorium at the same time so that we could renovate the entire program and the whole entire building. So one of the things that we did then is we started to work with that committee to redefine how the money could be spent that had been allocated for destruction of the building. And as of June in 2021, we received legislative action that transferred the building from the Bertha School District to the Eagle Bend School District. Right now, they're actually waiting for that dollar check to be transferred. The paperwork, my understanding, is done. And also the $1.5 million, and to that money to go instead of destruction to redesign of the building and rebuild. Our partner in this particular project is Central Minnesota Housing Partnership. We've been working with Deanna and Jason Krebsbach. We're excited to have somebody who is really interested in Central Minnesota, understands Central Minnesota, and is willing to put the effort in with us. So we're hoping to redesign the building. We're working with the partnership with the City of Eagle Bend and Central Minnesota Housing Partnership. I'm going to skip to something I think is really important about this, sometimes more important than the history of all the meetings we had, because it's been hundreds of hours by volunteers, is that the information that I got when I started this project, and I got this information from Harry Grammond, who developed Eagle Heights in Gray Eagle. And basically what he said is he went to every door and talked to everybody in Gray Eagle about the project. And that's kind of what we've tried to do, is invite people to the table to be part of it so they know what's going on. So we do a lot of small meetings, and we do a lot of involvement and put a lot of time in. But he said it took him 7 years. So determining that and the lack of funding for housing, it was obvious that it was going to take time to get to the point where actually housing reached a point where it was actually not only a local focus, but nationally and well as statewide, because the dollars and cents, we can always have a need, we can have a building, but without the dollars, we can't move forward. And it's really exciting to this group and this organization that's been working behind this, that right now it looks like this is one of the biggest movements that we've had in housing probably since the late 70s. And so we're seeing that this option was going to be something that can move forward with us. Our other detours have had us to create a lot of partnerships. And that's one of the things that we learned, those of us who've been a part of Blandon and working with the Initiative Foundation, to just keep on going. And the Initiative Foundation has always stepped forward with some extra dollars to help us to do the planning and to keep that community involvement going. Without that, I don't think we would have stepped forward. The next thing we're working on, and particularly in this area along with this, is a partnership plan, is working to increase broadband in the area, because that's extremely important for the seniors. The seniors are looking for a place where they can stay in their community, stay focused with their families, continue to go to church, be involved. One of the things that I think is an important focus that I've learned in this process is that seniors are economic development. We're so used to thinking economic development is that you're going to drive by a big manufacturing plant, or you're going to drive by a hospital and you're going to think of the number of employees for economic development in that way. But the basic of economic development can also be the foundation of keeping your senior community solid and living in your community, because every time a senior moves out, they take their checkbook with them. And it disrupts families. It disrupts the kind of lifestyle that they wanted to have. Another thing that's really important in the process here is we have a lot of people who are actually moving from the metro area and they're looking to come back to their roots. And this opportunity with developing facilities such as this renovation will give us the opportunity to have those people come back to be a part of their community as they retire. This isn't just the end of what this group identifies as the need. What we see is that every small town in Todd County, and frankly, in Region 5, really needs to be in the place to have additional affordable housing for seniors and to support those services within our communities so that we can have a healthy environment. And I think the COVID has really shown us how important that is, because one of the things that's happening is if you've got your family close by, they can help you, and they can help you with all kinds of things as you age. And it actually keeps the cost of retiring and being older down, and as well as a chance to do intergenerational things. We're really looking at the auditorium as an additional part of this whole facility, that creating a campus where we can design some things that will include seniors. We'll probably do some internships. We're thinking of plays. Actually, in discussing this with Eric from the school in Bertha, he said, if we get the auditorium done along with this as an adjacent part of this, we will have a place to have the senior prom. And I think that, and I found that rather reflective, because we can actually probably cater it from the kitchen because we've got the food service right there. And it's also given us the opportunity to provide good jobs for people who want to work at our kitchen, and we'll do the same for our seniors in this housing facility. Not only for them to have a comfortable, safe place to live, to move over so that we can create a bigger workforce area. When seniors move out and over, then we'll have an extra 20 to 24 units housing, probably rural homes, small town homes that families can move into, and that will change the whole workforce dynamic. Now, if we could actually do that in every small town in Todd County, we could possibly do it and have 100 to 225 affordable units, and that might actually create that many workforce units that would make us have a stronger community. We're looking at a lot of different kinds of funding. One of the fundings that we're looking for is to actually apply for historical grant funding, because we would like to preserve the beauty of and the uniqueness of this building while we're doing that. And so that's one of the areas that we're looking for additional funding. And also working with other centers so that we can have ideas that will make this be something that will move with seniors, because seniors are required to have different kinds of services than they did 20 or 30 years ago, and involve them in actually helping and create and design that community grassroots senior service core.
Berna, that's wonderful. We're doing, all three of you did such a great job of characterizing your projects that were fantastic on time. Let me share two questions, and any of the three of you can respond to either question and in any order you want, which buys time for the other two to think about their answer. My first question is, if you knew then what you know now, what would you do differently, or time it, finance it? What have you learned in implementing your projects? Because none of these happened overnight. And the second question, just so you know what's coming, is what's the best thing that you've done that could be replicated elsewhere in the region? Something you'd really want. If you only had 1 minute to tell somebody what a great experience this was, what would you want them to know about your project? And I'll let you all just jump up and down and answer in the order you'd like.
I think I'll go backwards on the second question. I think that what you need to do, we need to do, and you need to understand how vital having the community support you in what it does, and that you need to find a community that actually recognizes the need and is willing to move mountains to do it. Maybe they might not be very big mountains, but for them, it's a big mountain. In retrospect, I would also like to indicate I've been working in senior services or community services for nearly 40 years. And what I always find is that government programs are not always there when you need them. And when they come, you better be ready to move. And so one of the things that was basically important with example, the kitchen, is that we were in place and ready to move. So when the funding became available, we could apply for it. I think sometimes we don't, another thing we don't do is we're not noisy enough out here in rural Minnesota. I think that's one of the things I'd like to see is I'd like to see more action taken for people to get that message out there that rural is important. I shared this with a doctor a while ago. You do not want all of us to move to the cities. It isn't going to work because you'll never get to work. You won't be able to drive on the road because we're going to be trying to figure out where we're going. And that isn't where we want to be. In a healthy area is finding ways for people to retire and commuting to doctor's appointments when they need to, but also to create a community that has to deal with both young people and old people. One of the things we've been involved here in Todd County and Long Prairie is working on getting affordable health care and daycare services. And that is a crisis in our area. So building a community is about all ages. And even though I work for senior services, I have to speak for the young people because we serve each other well.
I would just say as far as lessons learned, and I mentioned it when I was talking about White Oak Estates, but just having that communication up front, especially if you're dealing with maybe a specialized population, and really having a plan for how things are going to go once the project is actually done and you have tenants in your building. And I'm speaking more to the severe and persistent mental illness side of what we've been doing with housing, because that's involving, DHS and housing support and how the service provider is working with the county. And there's a lot of moving parts. And I'd say that was a big lesson for us, is that the more you can have those processes in place and have everybody on the same page, I think that's really going to help. Because I don't know about other developers, but sometimes I think we're focused so much on moving dirt and bricks and mortar, but you're building those buildings to help people, and they're going to live there. And so having those processes in place, and especially if you're property managing them like we do, Skip, you guys manage your properties. It's all part of the development process for us. So I guess that's my 2 cents on that.
As far as what I would do differently, I'd build twice the size project. In these smaller communities, the thing you struggle with is you need a market study to go to a lender, and for some of the approval processes. And we built it to the maximum amount of units that the market study suggested, which was 37. Well, we'll fill it in that building in 90 days. We could have easily filled a 50 or 60 unit building in probably 120 days. And there's that much demand, but you bump up against those kind of restrictions that hold you back. And a larger building is actually more efficient too. You've got one elevator, you've got the same community room, the same patio area, the same amenities. It's just that it's a bigger building, but you can absorb some of that common cost amongst all the units. So I would have done that. I would have gone bigger. Could it be replicated? Absolutely. I think it can be replicated. I don't know to the degree of the employer contributing for a second project that much, but I know they would be involved and be interested in doing it again. But what is replicated is, I think we can't be afraid to reach out to employers and see what they'll do. It might not be being the lender. Our team has been up on War Road and talking to Marvin's, and it's like, why don't you guys donate windows? You know, maybe there's other things you can tap into that an employer can do that makes them feel good about it, other than just always asking for, you know, equity or grants or donations. You know, there's other things. So I think reaching out and not being afraid to ask and find out what can be obtained is totally replicatable and something we need to do for this workforce housing programs.
Skip, because you brought it up, I'll do a little, it's not self-promotion, it's almost the opposite. The Initiative Foundation is open to providing $5,000 challenge matches to local units of government to do that feasibility analysis, that market assessment. I got to tell you, I don't have trouble giving away money. As of yesterday, all of 2021's grant dollars are spent, but 2022 is only, what, 6 weeks away. And if your community needed that to attract someone like Skip, we should start talking tomorrow. I assume most of you know that, but in case you don't, I have a real affinity for Long Prairie, and I hold it up often as one of the most interesting communities in the region. Another contrast community is Mora, where there's not a single large employer. Everyone is small. Do you have any ideas of how a community like that, which is not uncommon in central Minnesota, might engage with a developer like you, where you don't have that large employer who could kind of speak for the whole community?
Well, we actually built a project in Mora just a few years ago, a senior project. It was a demonstration project with tax credits from Minnesota Housing Finance, 24 unit building, leased up right away. I don't think we've had a single person move out since it's been opened. It's highly successful. And so in that community, that, you know, there was a strong senior need, but they also had great senior programs there. And they almost had a senior campus that the HRA had been working on building there. And we were able to work with, and we actually did this as a fee owner to the HRA. The HRA is the owner of the property in the city. And we just helped them obtain the funding, got the project built, and then we manage it for them. So in Mora, you know, that may be the, you know, the senior is one way. You don't have to have a major.
Skip, you just muted again.
You don't have to have a major employer to have a successful application to Sarah Bunn's program with the Workforce Housing Grant Program. You know, have 10 employers. In Long Prairie, we had the chamber helped us obtain maybe 10 different employer letters, plus the meat packing plant, plus the school, plus the phone company. I mean, we packed it with a lot of employer supports, which I think is better than one big one. But the one big one is easier to write a check.
I, again, kind of taking facilitator's prerogative. I'm seeing all kinds of money to improve access to quality, affordable, economically sustainable childcare. And that could include capital expenses. So if anyone was looking for another way to partner, integrating childcare, particularly if the target market is young families, is another way to have a rentor with an additional amenity. That, not that any of you have described trouble filling your buildings, but you know, they'll fight to get in there if you've got childcare right downstairs. Jason, Verna, and Skip, anything else you're dying to share about your project? Let me just leave it right there. None of you are unclicking. So I will then, we're still good on time. And Jeremiah reminded me we're going to have this informal Q&A opportunity when we formally adjourn. But since I've got three wise people still up here on the podium, if anyone would like to ask a question, go ahead and unmute. And if you want to direct it, please do. I'm not uncomfortable with silence,
Yeah,
but
I don't have a question, Don. But I do want to make mention of the fact that I frankly wasn't expecting employer-assisted housing, to come up as a theme and a topic of such great interest. And thanks to hearing about what's going on in Long Prairie and what Skip is doing, and we're hearing about it today, and it's alive and well. It may not be happening everywhere. What I wanted to highlight is in the chat, I put in a link to Greater Minnesota Housing Fund's Employer Assisted Housing How-To Handbook. And it says a lot of the things that were just said by Skip, but definitely there are many avenues to engaging with employers. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is be aligned with employers so that we're building housing for a growing workforce and solving that problem. And so even the conversation is highly valuable. But ultimately, or sort of, part B of that is, can we get them to invest? Can we participate, in the solution? And that's been proven over and over again to be possible. And in the handbook, there's probably 20 different examples of employer-assisted housing projects, and it doesn't include anything recent like the projects in War Road and Rosso and so forth, or the ones that were talked about today. But it's everything from providing land to providing cash, investments, to helping their employees with down payment assistance and things like that. And Eric is talking about local chambers are more interested in, and the interest is there. And I think the trick is to get investment. It's like with everything, people love affordable housing, but leaning in and really being part of the solution takes time and money. So the manual is very well researched. It's in its third printing, and we've tabulated not all, but we've tabulated the employer-assisted housing investments from employers in Minnesota, and it exceeds $20 million. So everything from, Main Street businesses putting a few dollars in each and coming up with $10,000, $20,000 or $50,000 to maybe something more significant like $500,000. Or in Mayo Clinic's case, nobody can, replicate what they've been able to do in Rochester, but they've put in tens of millions of dollars. But it is a great strategy to pursue.
Warren, I suspect, and again, not trying to truncate, we're now almost back on time, but I believe you could probably begin your socialization early. Sure.
So thanks to everybody on the last panel. And I think that all I want to do is just offer a few takeaways. And this is by no means all inclusive, but some things that I heard, or I think that we all heard, was that, again, employer-assisted housing is needed. Employers are needed at the table. We heard about it in Long Prairie. We heard about it from Skip. I just mentioned a few things. We also heard that a lot of our organizations working in communities of color are focused on building wealth through entrepreneurship and creating enterprises and businesses. And we do know that building wealth is essentially the key to long-term housing stability for most people. And so anything that we can do to encourage that wealth building is also a health, or excuse me, is also a housing solution. And so I know that people were very interested in Irene's program for developers of color, but that's a wealth building entrepreneurship program really at its core. We also heard that tribal collaboration is occurring. It's innovative. It's happening in Minnesota and maybe not happening in other places. It's difficult, but it is essential. And out of that work, we got the message that it's critical for tribal communities to be at the table at the beginning and not at the end, and a strong encouragement to include people of color in those chamber boardrooms and in planning projects in community development work, and doing it together. We also heard that we need to invest in capacity building to build equity, and that it's important to be open to new voices. So a lot of conversation occurred around equity. And then in the small group, we heard that making capital available early and directly to communities of color is also important. And funders should trust the work of people that are dealing with the issues firsthand and trying to solve problems firsthand and not make it difficult or challenging to access funding. On the health and housing side of things, we heard that there's opportunity to build on the past successes of all the permanent supportive housing work that's been done and that will continue to be built, and the efforts. I'm just going to throw some names out here. Healthcare institutions have participated in affordable housing, and they include Sanford, Mayo Clinic, St. Luke's Hospital in Duluth, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and United Health Group. And these are some of the institutions. Incentricare is very interested in the central region, and we've had many conversations with them around different project opportunities. And I guess I'll close with what hopefully is really good news, and that is that there's a lot more federal dollars coming. And when they come to the state, the housing money will be administered by Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and that'll pose new opportunities or present new opportunities for all of us working in the affordable housing field to expand production and preservation.